Hey Josh, what are you doing?
I am playing in my Game Boy Advance.
Would you say that is an old school game system?
It is an old school game system.
Speaking of old school game systems, welcome to today's episode of The Voice of the Nerds. I'm Henry from Hijoto Gamer.
Come on, Mega Man. Shoot those back! What? Wait. And I'm Josh from Guy Joe Ja. Today we're going to be discussing our experiences, our favorite games, our favorite consoles in the old school genre.
Yes, in old school, we're referring to anything that came before the Xbox 360. So anything before, what, like 2005, is that?
Yep. I'll start with my favorite classic system. No-brainer, Nintendo 64. Oh, that's my earliest memories of gaming. And our first few games were Super Mario 64 and GoldenEye. Oh, our family just played the heck out of those games. So much fun. In fact, Super Mario 64 is the reason why I'm unhealthily obsessed with Mario today. And in fact, he inspired me to draw. And no, It's not Mario Paint.
I also loved and grew up with the Nintendo 64. I didn't personally own one, but both of my neighbors on both sides own Nintendo 64s. One of my friends, he had Donkey Kong Country 64, is it?
Yep.
And Super Smash Bros. For the 64. So I'd play those two games at his house, and then I would go over to our other neighbors' houses who had Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64. I grew up playing the 64 pretty much, and then even when I moved to another city, then even some of my friends had 64s then. I gotta say, I think my favorite has got to be the Game Boy Advance SP. Simply because the SP finally had a backlight. So you no longer had to buy those bulky lights. Don't get me wrong, the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, they were all amazing. But just the backlighting was a brilliant add-on for the SP. And it had games like Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green, Ruby Sapphire, Emerald, and Mario and Luigi, Superstar Saga, such a good game. You know, it was just an amazing thing. And the fact that it was really small, you know, the smallest portable gaming device for its time, was just amazing with the flippy lid. I actually tricked one of my friends and told him that I had a teeny laptop.
You use the D-pad and the A button to select keys, but...
Speaking of D-pads, Nintendo was the first company ever to make the D-pad.
The more you know.
I stole that from Josh. He did.
Okay, so now that I've had put enough thought into it, my favorite handheld's actually going to be a tie between the Nintendo DS and the Game Boy Advance. Simply being, the Nintendo DS was an amazing console. It had really good games. Super Mario 64, DS, New Super Mario Bros.
Yes! The one with multiplayer minigames, like poker. Oh, that was a good game, actually.
Now, the reason why it's a tie between the DS and Game Boy Advance is because the Game Boy Advance was backwards compatible with my Game Boy games and Game Boy Color games. I had Mario Tennis, Game & Watch Gallery, Super Mario Land 2. I played the heck out of those games. But the reason why the DS is tied is because it could play Game Boy Advance games and Nintendo DS games, but it couldn't play Game Boy Color games. I was so bummed about that. I was like, why? And you couldn't download them on the Nintendo DS. It was a pretty new handheld. You couldn't really download anything on it other than DS Download Play. But I was just kind of disappointed by that. But I still had my original Game Boy Advance, so I could just I was still happy.
I specifically remember that. I opened my DS on Christmas morning, right? My favorite game was Pokemon Crystal, the old Game Boy Color cartridge thing. So I grabbed my DS and like shove it in, and I was like, no, it doesn't fit. So that kind of took my respect down a little, but that was still an amazing thing. Anyway, so I gotta say, my favorite classic console is probably the Nintendo GameCube. Now, I know I made myself out to sound like a Nintendo hater in our first discussion on Nintendo video, but I gotta say, I actually love Nintendo. It's just the Nintendo Wii that I'm not a big fan of. The GameCube, I gotta say, is probably my favorite game system ever. Luigi's Mansion, Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door, Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker, Mario Sunshine, Mario Kart Double Dash, Super Smash Bros. Melee.
Oh, man.
What a good era for Nintendo. And those controllers were awesome.
No,
They were like, I don't know what to call it, like a spin-off of the original classic normal like controller with the triggers. They're like,
I don't know, it's just...
Perfection is the Nintendo GameCube. And it was a portable, non-portable system, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think...
It even had a handle.
That handle is so convenient. It's amazing. No, but anyway, it was bad because and there was no mature games. There was no blood. There was no Call of Duty. So it was bad.
You know what? Screw that. Just GameCube is the best.
People can hate the GameCube because they didn't have any mature games.
Honestly, I think you gotta be pretty mature to withstand Luigi's Mansion. That is a scary game.
Yeah, it does have some scary moments, and I'll tell you now. Spoiler alert if you haven't beaten the game, but when I first beat the game, I saw the ending of Luigi crying, I was like, what is this? Luigi doesn't cry. Well, other than the Mario and Luigi games, he cries every other second. But those were legitimate tears. I was like, whoa! Nintendo! Hit right here, but that's not so sad anymore. I was like 5, 6 years old when I beat that game. I mean, this is coming from the guy who cried when his older brother beat Baby Bowser in Yoshi's Story. I cared.
I gotta say, another amazing classic game console that I think gets hated on quite a lot is the Xbox, the original.
I really like the Xbox.
The only problem I had with it, where I honestly didn't like the controllers that, were about this big. They were a bit too big, but then when they slimmed them down a little bit, it was good. I mean, it had games like Oddworld, Munch's Odyssey, Fusion Frenzy, probably one of the best 4-player party-type games ever, Mad Dash. It's one of the only racing games I know of where you're actually running, besides Sonic R. Random fact, did you know that Mario Kart, the first Mario Kart game, was originally supposed to be called Mario Kart R, but they had to change the name because Sonic R came out just before that. So Nintendo didn't want to make it sound like they were ripping off Sega.
The more you know.
But Sonic R was a good racing game.
Yes,
the graphics were... But, like I've said many times, graphics don't make a game.
Yeah.
Like I said before about growing up playing the 64, I also kind of grew up playing the Xbox, because the same neighbors who had the 64, their dad worked for Microsoft. So I'm pretty sure they got a free Xbox, and since he worked for Microsoft, they got all their games for super cheap. I mean, I only ever played a few, the games I brought up before. But the Xbox was a good system, considering it was a first ever system. I mean, Microsoft kind of joined in the video game race a bit late, but they did a fantastic job. Now with the 360, good job, Microsoft.
Kudos to you.
I gotta say though, my favorite old school video game, it's a really tough choice. I honestly can't break it down to one, so I'll just give you a few of my favorites. Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker, is definitely up there. Mario Kart Double Dash was amazing. It was just awesome. All my favorite games are probably on either the GameCube, 64, or the PlayStation 2. I own one.
I don't. On the subject of favorite games, I guess I'll give you my feel of mine. For me, Super Mario 64 is definitely right up there, just because, it's one of the first games I ever played, and it was really revolutionary. It really set a standard for 3D platformers. Then there's Mario Tennis for the Game Boy Color. It's a tennis RPG. It's like a mixture of Pokemon and tennis, where you're trying to be the very best.
I wanna be the
very best.
best.
You're trying to get the very best by earning experience for your player. You have a buddy, a doubles member with really good AI. You level up your your party by distributing experience points, and it's so much fun. Do I need to say any more?
Majora's Mask.
Majora's Mask. I actually didn't grow up with Majora's Mask, but I have it on my virtual console.
Yeah, on the Wii, me too. But I gotta say, I think they made that game a little too difficult.
I'm actually stuck at the Stone Tower.
And this guy is like the kind of a kid who can beat at least any Nintendo game.
The game itself, it's pretty dark. I actually like the dark tones. It's pretty different.
Yeah. Anyway, so on to Sony now. Speaking about old school, PlayStation 1.
Oh man.
It was amazing. I just gotta say, that was an amazing game system. One of my friends had a PlayStation 1 and a PlayStation 2. I don't think he realized the PlayStation 2 was past compatible, so he kept both. They were both amazing. I was like, why do you still have all your PlayStation 1 games when you have a PlayStation 2? And he was like, oh, because the PlayStation 1 games are still amazing. And I was at an age where I was like, no, they're old, so they must be terrible. But I played them, they're so good. The Simpsons Wrestling. It's a fun game. Sony's done a good job. Honestly, I think back ages ago, don't hate if you don't agree, but I think video game companies kind of used to be a lot more original. Like, there weren't as many sequels back then. They were constantly coming out with new characters, new games. But nowadays, it kind of mostly seems like sequels coming out. It's kind of a bummer.
I think it's because the ideas are running out. Like, the ideas are getting slim, because there's only so much you can do in a medium. For me personally, I can't say I grew up with Sony too much. I mean, my grandparents have a PlayStation 1 and 2, and they've got games like Crash Bandicoot Warp, all the Spyro games, and a demo disc that has, like, the demo for the Brave Fencer Musashi, which I really want to play. I've actually never owned a Sony console. I'm a Nintendo man, in case you haven't noticed.
I guess to defend the point that it's hard to come up with new video game characters, right now, we have to come up with a brand new video game character in 5 seconds. Okay, 10 seconds. We have to brainstorm looks and what he does, and then we'll sketch it and stick it in this video. 10 seconds starts now. Okay, 3 feet tall.
No.
3 feet tall. He wears a hat similar to this one. It's pink, and it has a letter Z on it, and his name is Zario. And he wears pink overalls, a blue undershirt. He has a mustache, and in his hand, he holds about the same size as this with eyes. He holds carrots. Okay, I think that was over 10 seconds, but there you go, Zario. Expect a sketch. So, anyway, we're probably running out of time about now. I mean, I forgot to get the clock, but I'd assume we are.
Yeah.
In the comment box below, write us and tell us what you think is the best old school game system, old school game, and old school game company.
And also, don't forget to give us a like, maybe subscribe, or something along those lines. I think it's down there now. Yeah.
No, it's...
Yeah, subscribe
It
button.
kind of went from being there to there to there to there to there.
I think it's down now. So.
Well, like this video, subscribe, comment. Don't be a hateinator. Nobody likes a hateinator.
And we'll see you next week.
Hey, you know, we just said this jinx. You owe me a soda. And thus concludes today's episode. Thank you for watching.